Because he's trying to help everybody, so they're all safe. To protect the country and his family.
I knew he was doing it for a good thing, so it made me feel a little bit better, but not much.
Every night before I go to bed, I'd pray that God would bring my dad home.
Today, fully half of the military members assigned to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo, and other worldwide locations are citizen soldiers, National Guard and Reserve members who have either volunteered or were involuntarily called to active duty in support of our military commitments. In this post-9/11 world, these citizen soldiers are being thrust into a full-time military role, and so too are their families. In this program, produced by the Kansas State University College of Human Ecology, we're going to look at some of the issues challenging families of reserve component members who are experiencing separation through multiple deployments. We'll be spending time with several Kansas families who, with their children, endured separation, loneliness, anxiety, hardship, disappointment, and frustration during their spouse's reserve deployment. Besides spending some time looking at their challenges, we'll share with you things that you can do to help a reserve component relative, a neighbor, friend, or church member better cope and survive those deployments. So let's start with the moment when reality hits both the service member and the family, the departure ceremony.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Salina, Kansas, and to the 1st Battalion, 161st Field Artillery's departure ceremony.
Standing in the shadows of giants, walking around weighed down by gear, this is their job 365 a year. To defend our freedom, to die for us, today they will pile on our charter bus. Shipped off to God knows where, to the wife and kids it's not fair. To the friends of those on this trip, I can only remind you not to forget. What they fight for and why they do it for them, me, and you.
I can't say it any better than what that young lady said is everything we do for you. So I want to thank the families for being here today.
I know that it was hard for them. I mean, it was, of course, going to be difficult, that it would be difficult for all of us.
I really didn't know what to do. I was like, what am I going to do now? 4 kids, full-time job. My wife's gone. Not going to be able to talk to her, maybe once a week if I'm lucky. I have no idea.
Well, the biggest thing for me was just leaving my family behind,
We came home and it was a day-by-day process. Wondering how the kids are feeling. I think that was my top concern, was making sure that they were handling it okay.
It's very scary knowing that you're here by yourself and you have not only you have to deal with a child, you have to deal with worrying about if he's okay over there. You have to worry about the, things at home. The car is breaking down, the bills, everyday things.
Well, we have to realize that these families are citizen soldiers. They leave their jobs, their families, their communities to serve their country.
Dr. Chuck Smith is an extension specialist in the K-State School of Family Studies and Human Services. As such, he spent his professional career studying and developing educational programs designed to understand and strengthen families, especially those with children.
It's difficult to deal with one deployment, but then it's not just twice as worse in the second deployment, it's greater than that, because that family is being stressed over and over again.
Each kid endures it differently. You might have a child that's like Caleb, that's just all over the place and saying, yeah, my dad's a soldier. You might have a child like Skylar that's, pulled back in, and then you might have a child like Caden that's just, I don't really understand what's going on.
What's your life like when your dad is deployed like this?
Well, I mostly go play with my friends, and we like to talk about my dad.
And why is that important, do you think, to you?
Because it's something my dad's doing, and I love my dad.
Well, young children are deeply affected by these deployments. The loss of that mother or father for a year or more is very taxing on young kids.
When I was in kindergarten, when we said the Pledge of Allegiance, I would start crying because I knew my dad was at Iraq and doing something good, and I would feel sad for him.
And how did the other kids and teacher react to you feeling that way?
She would ask what was the matter with me, and I would tell her what.
And did she help you?
Yeah.
What did she do to help you?
She told me that my dad is probably doing well and that it's okay to cry.
What do you think, Caden? Is it okay to feel sad?
Mm-hmm. Because everybody has to feel sad once in their life.
Skylar took it very hard. He bottled up his emotions, his feelings. He was not one that was open to talking about anything. You'd ask him and I'm fine. And so his grades did suffer. His interactions with other kids suffered.
I had a big issue of daydreaming and everything in class because I was so worrying about him dying or something like that, and coming home in a red car pulling up and saying that he's dead. Yeah, I didn't want that to happen.
As I was seeing him off, what went through my mind is, will I ever see him again?
My mom, she probably cried like 3 or 4 times a week. She mostly kept all her feelings to herself. She locked herself in her room. She would talk to her mom a lot about it. My youngest brother, he had very bad problems. His grades fell. He started becoming very distant.
When your dad or mom's deployed and you're just sitting there, you have nothing to do. You're usually thinking about them and everything. And when you think about them, it kind of makes you cry and everything, and makes you feel like they should be here. Why should they be over there?
You wanted to let them know what was going on in as much of a non-threatening way as you could.
So communication was important throughout.
It's very important, but it was also very hard because you didn't always know what to tell them. You didn't want to give them facts. Well, okay. You wanted to give them facts. You didn't want to give them scary facts. I'll never forget the phone call of when he was in the hospital and was injured and bruised and had swelling of his heart. And how do I tell that to my kids without scaring them to death?
You've heard some of what these families experienced with their deployments. It's challenging, to say the least. So what is it that helps families get through difficult times like this? Well, there's no one single answer because each family's circumstance is different. However, there is one characteristic common to families and individuals who have successfully dealt with deployments, and that's resiliency.
I think resilience is a really important component when we're talking about military families and what is affecting them.
Dr. Brianna Nelson Goff is a professor in the Kansas State University School of Family Studies and Human Services. She's done extensive studies on stress in military families resulting from multiple deployments.
I heard someone say, resilience really is about not giving up, about picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and trying again. And I think that makes it very simple, but it is, I think, really the foundation. That resilience isn't about getting it right the first time or not having problems, but resilience really is about having difficulties, having challenges, facing them, sometimes, to use a cowboy metaphor, sometimes getting bucked off, but getting yourself up, picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and trying again.
War has a very profound effect on everybody it touches. And if you can just learn to overcome and adapt to the changes it makes, you'll be okay.
Staying home is, I would say that it's got to be just as hard, if not harder, than actually going over there, because they didn't know what I was doing. And whether I was being shot at that day, or whether somebody was trying to blow us up, or, you know, whatever.
I would definitely do all of this again. The events of our life shape who we are, and the events of our lives have shaped where we're at. I would do it again. I would go through the year again to be where we're at now.
But everything that we've decided and done up to this point in our lives has brought us to where we are. And if we're happy with where we are, then we can't be regretful for any kind of decision that we've made before now.
I agree. Do it again. I'd go to Iraq and back with you.
This has been a long deployment, and I don't know if it's the added stress of I know what's going to happen, I know what it's like not to be able to talk to him, or I'm on a new level that he's actually over a squad of guys, and when I do get to talk to him, I get the, hey, so-and-so's wife's having issues, can you call her? It does add a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and I haven't had the outlets that I've had in the past. It's not being in the environment all the time. That's one of the nice things about active duty Army, is that they're all together all the time. There's somebody living next door within the block that knows what they're going through, knows the hassles, knows the stresses. And I don't have that. I mean, I have a best friend that's great, but she can only do so much and only knows so much. I actually had to go to the doctor and made a trip to the emergency room for an anxiety attack, and now I'm taking medicine to try to help calm my stress level and calm the nerves, and I feel almost like a burden on my kids.
By early June, Adrian's roller coaster ride was beginning to settle down, and the anxiety and panic attacks seemed to be a thing of the past. The kids were home for the summer, and she was able to spend more time with them. Then came June 17th. While Adrian and her children were at the house of their friend Julie, faulty wiring to the family's deep freezer ignited a fire that destroyed their house and most of their possessions, testing an already difficult deployment.
There started to become a turning point, I think, towards the summer when I started having the boys home more. But then we lost our home to a fire in the end of June, and I think it just brought it all back again. And when he went back, I had another panic attack.
Don's second deployment tested his family's resiliency to the limit. But Adrian and her boys did pick themselves up. They dusted themselves off, and they kept at it. An example of resiliency. They didn't do it alone, however. Successful deployments for the families relies heavily on a caring community, ranging from friends, extended family, neighbors, their faith-based organizations, supportive employers, and the larger community of local, state, and nationwide social service, educational, and governmental organizations and programs. Now, this is where you can participate, and you can make a difference.
Communities, or the sense of community, is a really important component for a couple of different reasons. One, I think it's important that that social support is there, that we have the people, the resources around us to help support us in those difficult times. I think for everyone, community may be a little bit different. For some, it may be a neighborhood community. For others, their community might be extended family. For others, it may be social service agencies, it may be the military itself that provides that network and that sense of community. For others, it's faith. Again, a lot of it, I think, has to do with that identity, identifying with a group, and having that support from them.
Well, I think of friends as like the first line of support. Well, the strength of a friend, I think, is in its like natural relationship. It's not something planned. It's something that happens. And I think because it's natural, I think friends have to not worry about a lot of things. I mean, am I doing the right thing? Don't worry about that. Let your caring about that family guide you in terms of what you need to do.
I had a best friend that when I wouldn't answer the phone for 24 hours, she would pull in my driveway with a Dr. Pepper and a white Kit Kat, chocolate Kit Kat, and say, okay, we need to get your butt out of the house.
Whenever there was an issue with her or with the boys or a concern or something, you know, I knew I was only a phone call away.
I couldn't have survived it without her. There is no way that I could have made it through the deployment upright, dressed the right way, going out my door without her.
Like, if you didn't have friends there to support you and stuff, if you had no friends, I don't think I could have made it. I would have broke down and just sat there and did nothing and think about him and think about other ways he could have gotten hurt or something like that.
How did you get through all this personally?
My family. You know, my mom showing up on a day that I just want to quit and giving me the strength to keep going. My dad showing up, my dad owns a meat locker, and it could be something as simple as, hey, thought maybe you needed some steaks for dinner. Just because and it's not about the steak, he thought about me that day and was kind of worried. You know, or my grandma just, you know, calling out of the blue. My mom was always there, and her plate is full already, and she just took on more. So that's probably how I got through. His mom, same thing. I don't know if I would have came through as well as I did without them. I know I wouldn't have.
Well, I think neighbors have a really critical role. We have to realize friends sometimes are not neighbors. I mean, they live across town or maybe in another town entirely. It's very important for these families to feel like they live in what I would call a caring community.
Sometimes people are afraid to approach families, military families, because they don't know what to say, they don't know how to say it. Sometimes it's more than just what you say, it's just about being willing to listen.
Just knock on the door. Just knock on the door and tell the parents, you know, I'm right here. The kids want to play basketball on my driveway, please let them come on over. If you need to go to the grocery store, we'll keep an eye on the kids and the kids can come hang out with us.
It is a role reversal, and when it's the husband's gone, it's, you know, what can we do? Well, the oil needs to be changed in the car, you know. When it's the opposite, where in our case, where, you know, Shelly's gone, you know, the wife is gone, it's what can we do? And I really couldn't tell you, you know.
Could I say, offer to come and change the bedding. Just do a once through, a mom once through in the house.
After agree there.
I think it's important for people in the community to check on their neighbors. Just peek in the door and say, you know, what can I do? And the spouse is going to say, nothing, I'm fine. And say, well, how about I come in and help you get your dishes done? Or how about I come in and help your daughter do homework today? You know, just the biggest thing is to notice that they're there and that they're by themselves and that that they do need the help even when they're not asking for it.
I think oftentimes the faith-based community is an important part of just the community in general. It's a more formal network, I think. Oftentimes when we're talking about resilience, one of the factors is having that sense of faith, whatever denomination or, you know, religious area you are from.
It was a tough year. It was a hard year. I wish my soldier maybe hadn't have gone, but I got through it. What was it that let me get through it? I knew that my church was there. I knew that my clergy cared for me, and they cared enough to come by and visit. They called frequently.
Numerous faith communities in Kansas have also assumed an active role in recognizing the sacrifices military families have made on behalf of the country. One such example is in Manhattan with the St. Thomas More Catholic Parish. Mike Ryan is a retired Army officer who's active in supporting military families in the Manhattan area, including a special military family appreciation mass.
Basically, the Mass is dedicated to our two primary groups are the waiting spouses and the active duty National Guard, Reserve, and ROTC components. And I think anytime you have a very public presentation, that it's an emotional thing. I think it would tell them they're not alone.
You've by now gathered there are a great number of similarities and some differences between reserve component service members and the regular full-time military. There is one major difference between the two that can have devastating consequences for the families of guardsmen and reservists: reemployment of their civilian jobs after an extended tour of duty. Not knowing if you have your job back creates anxiety for reserve members both during and after deployments, especially during this down economy when civilian jobs are not as secure as they once were. This is where the community of employers comes in. The Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act of 1994 gives reservists certain reemployment rights when called into federal service. It's important now, more than ever, that employers recognize the sacrifices of their citizen soldier employees and their family while they are deployed. This is something that's important to Don.
I know I've seen a lot of soldiers come back and not have a job, and then they it's quite a bit of stress for them to try and get back into the civilian world because they don't have a job.
When he leaves, we miss him. It creates a bit of a problem for us, but I understand what he's doing and why he has to do what he does, and I think we should all be supportive because they're out there doing things that probably we wouldn't want to be doing ourselves.
Numerous employers across Kansas feel the same way Don's does. They range from small independent businesses to Fortune 500 companies.
There are companies out there that can't afford it. I am fortunate enough to be working with a big company to where they do offer the benefits.
Well, our policy is obviously military friendly.
We stand behind them when they're standing up for us. They're protecting our freedoms. It's really the least we can do.
My thing that I would say to these companies is acknowledgement. Acknowledge your soldier. I know that several times I was deployed, I always get emails from coworkers and supervisors. At least I know that they're thinking of me, and that means a lot.
Not only is employer support for the reservist critically important, so too is employer support for the spouse.
It's just as important for the employer to be aware of the spouse that's behind working and do whatever they can, whether it's give them like a half a day off, or give them a day off, or, and just tell them, hey, your kids are sick, go ahead and leave.
Just to understand that there's dentist appointments and there's, PTA meetings, there's issues at school, and to be able to just go and be able to deal with them.
Luckily, my job, they work with me, and I work different hours just to accommodate her, being able to take her to and from school.
You've seen and heard from Desiree of her struggles as a military spouse while Paul served in Iraq as a gunner on a Humvee. She admits that in those early days, she knew little about available programs and support systems for her and her children. That soon changed as she started working for the National Guard with their emerging programs for the children of deployed soldiers and airmen.
I work with kids all across the state who are somewhere in the deployment cycle. So we got them all together and we do training on different ways they can help themselves cope, different tools for their toolbox on how to handle when they're missing them, handle when they're mad because they missed the birthday, different things that the parent is going to miss and the children are going to be upset about. We do summer camps.
Of the summer camp programs, there are 2 that are designed for different age groups. For the younger kids, it's an introduction to mom or dad's new world.
We do it as a military environment to give the kids a real feel for what their parent goes through. It really connects them with the training that the parent has to do. Then they understand it a little better.
Desiree's quick to point out this is more than a show and tell of military life. It's an opportunity for the children to interact and bond with others in similar circumstances.
We have a teen camp for 13 to 17-year-olds, which is not military style at all. It's structured, unstructured. They have a lot of free time where they can just sit down and hang out and talk to each other about stuff. They don't even always talk about the military aspect. They find an immediate bond with another military kid that's there.
Another program geared toward helping children of military families is Operation Military Kids. It's a national program that, here in Kansas, is a collaborative effort with the Army, Kansas State University, and 4-H. One of its outreach programs is to work with local service and governmental organizations to educate and assist in developing support programs for military families.
We do what we call Ready, Set, Go training, and that is a training that we go out into the community and we offer a 2-hour training for anyone that deals with kids. And that's like policemen and church people and 4-H leaders and school officials. And we talk about military culture because unless you're in the service, you don't understand the culture of military. So we talk about that. And then at the end of our training, we give the community a chance to sit down and say, you know, knowing all of these things, now what can we do as a community? I think the whole thing is that we have to make people aware.
Our story has covered a topic currently affecting hundreds of thousands of families across the United States. And when you look at all of the Guard and reservists in Kansas, as well as the regular military units at Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, and McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, it's readily apparent Kansas has a higher percentage of families affected by this war than many other states. As the title of this program suggests, they are ultimately doing this on our behalf. So we've covered things we can do for them on their behalf. We've also discovered the importance of the various communities here in Kansas of friends, neighbors, employers, social agencies, and faith-based groups. Perhaps the key message here is to do something for a family in need so that homecomings such as this will be joyous and long-lasting.